Hello, welcome to this special episode of Akashic Storytelling, Reading for the Collective. I'm an Akashic Records reader and also a multi-creative storyteller. The Akasha is the endless space or the endless infinite space in my Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and I'm trained by my indigenous Hindu teacher Sadhwinder Simone to read your Akashic records. Now, as a metaphor to help you understand, the Akasha is also known as an infinite library with infinite records, including the records of your particular life, all of your past lives and future lives, and all timelines, all parallel universes. And so it's the source of all infinite wisdom, information, and insights. And I do these readings to help you get clarity and clear direction in any area of your life. Whether it be relationships, if you're confused about dating relationships, whether it's that family, friends, intimate relationships, whether it be your job, career, business, life purpose. Now, I do specialize in being a pathfinder, helping you with your life purpose, your creativity, and your power, helping you reclaim your freedom, your joy, and your pleasure. That's the Akasha side of this. On the storytelling side of this, I also tell stories because story is the best way to learn. Our brains, according to the latest neuroscience research, story is not how we escape reality, but actually how we navigate reality. And so I started this show to combine the two powerful disciplines of Akasha with storytelling. And often I would bring on a guest every Monday, usually. This is a special episode for the collective. Usually I would bring on a guest every Monday, open up their Akashic records, and ask the Akasha what is the best story for them to hear right now. And then I would read them that story. It could be a true story or a fictional story. And then I ask them how the story impacted them. And then I have the Akasha guide them on how they're responding to their response, what the Akasha has to say about what they're saying about how the story is impacting them. And then if they have any specific questions for the Akasha, that's an opportunity for them to ask and be answered. Because normally this is only available on as private sessions, which are very rare that I provide these days. These days you can only have these readings as part of my programs that you join. And I'll be launching very soon 2 new programs called Akashic Creativity, followed by Akashic Power. Akashic Power will be launched in October, and then this month I'll be launching Akashic Creativity, most likely, to help you overcome your creative blocks as artists, seers, change makers, teachers, activists, authors, singer-songwriters. And so when I opened up my Akasha today, this is a story that I've been guided to read for the collective. It's from this book, Carbon Yoga, The Vegan Metamorphosis by Sailesh Rao. And I'll be reading a true story about helping nature reclaim itself It's a story about vision and trailblazing and evolution as a human species, from becoming a predator species into a caretaker species. It's a story of what's actually possible, a story of solutions, of vision, of the next evolution. Yes, there is climate change, climate destruction going on. We need more climate justice and environmental justice because of environmental racism globally. And it's time to let nature reclaim itself. And this is a story about that. What's possible when human beings coexist with nature. So I'm going to play this music while I read to help with the grounding aspect to it. So the author went to visit his friends in the Western Ghats of India in 2009. And this is a story about their two friends, Pamela and Anil, and their new initiative, some project that they created. Our hosts, a couple from New Jersey, Pamela and Anil Malhotra, had been telling us the story of their Save Animals Initiative sanctuary over dinner. They started the SAI Sanctuary or SAI, Save Animals Initiative, by purchasing a 55-acre coffee plantation in the Kodagu district of Karnataka in 1991. Live video keeps pausing. Tearing down the fences and just letting it exist in its natural state. From 1991 onwards, they had been steadily acquiring neighboring coffee plantations and tearing down fences so that wild animals could in their now 300-acre plus sanctuary. Sure enough, the animals did take refuge, and those coffee plantations turned into the luscious tropical forest that you could imagine, all in the span of less than 20 years. Wow. Wow. This was Eden, sheer perfection, sheer perfection. As Pamela described it, the forest regeneration was mainly due to the animals that wandered into the Sai sanctuary from the nearby national forest and then chose to make the sanctuary their home base. The elephants would eat ripe jackfruit in the national forest and then come back and deposit the seeds with their droppings in the sanctuary. The jackfruit tree is one of the primary tree species in the Western Ghat forest of India, and its ripe fruit is a favorite snack for the elephant. Also, birds and other animals dropped other seeds over time, and these diverse seeds combined with the rich soil and monsoon rains to initiate the afforestation process. It's the opposite of deforestation. It's afforestation. All Pam and Anil had to do was to patrol their land to keep the human poachers out and the animals safe. They didn't have to do much tilling or fertilizing in order for the forest to regenerate. The elephants and other wildlife did most of it. One of the advantages that the Sai sanctuary enjoyed was its close proximity to the Bandipur and Nagahole National Forest and the Mudu Malai Wildlife Sanctuary. However, the biodiversity found in the Sai sanctuary is far richer than the biodiversity in these nationally protected forests. Mainly because these protected forests are also, quote unquote, managed by the Forest Service of India. As any visitor to these nationally protected forests would attest, this management had resulted in rows and rows of neatly planted teak and eucalyptus trees, which are useful for furniture and lumber and count as tree cover in forest land surveys, but are otherwise out of place in the forests of the Western Ghats. At the Sai sanctuary, the trees were growing randomly, not in neat rows. The underbrush was so thick that only creepy, crawly creatures could traverse through. The main paths in the forest were the ones made by the elephants, who are the only wild animals capable of clearing such paths in the forest. All the other animals, including us humans, followed these elephant paths. Elephants also casually break branches from trees to eat the leaves while creating openings for sunlight to stream down and nourish the underbrush. Everything that the elephants did in the forest seemed to have some beneficial impact on the forest. It was as if the elephants knew exactly what to do to be an asset to the forest ecosystem, to keep life flourishing. They belonged. So did all the other animals. In contrast, it seemed that the best that we human beings could do to be an asset to the forest ecosystem, to keep life flourishing, was to simply stay away from the forest. This troubled me as I was running that informal insect taxi service for my sister's benefit. I was also born in the same forest, some 200 miles away from the Sai sanctuary, and some 60 years before. But why don't I belong as in the forest ecosystem? How did I grow up to be such an outcast in my own home, my birthplace? This is a common theme in many environmental circles, that human beings, with those in traditional indigenous cultures exempted, are a destructive force in the Earth's many ecosystems. We don't belong. In contrast, every creature in the sanctuary seemed to have found an ecological niche, so that the night sounds of the forest filled every octave of my auditory spectrum. Clearly, each had a distinct identity within that ecosystem. Between them, these creatures had turned a coffee plantation into such a thriving forest that students of ecology from reputed American universities were spending months at the Sai sanctuary studying the biodiversity of the Western Ghats. The wildlife routinely contributed more to the recovering ecosystem than they consumed from it, until the ecosystem flourished and reached a thriving, stable state. That's so important. They contribute more to the recovering ecosystem than they consumed, so that the ecosystem flourished, which is the opposite of what many human beings on the planet are doing, especially white people. In contrast, we humans tend to consume far more from even a flourishing ecosystem than we contribute to it, and thereby cause its rapid degradation. So wild animals live their normal lives and the forest thrives. Humans, especially for those of us in the cities of the world, live what we consider to be our normal lives, and not just the forest, but the entire planet dies? Wow. Let that sink in for a bit, right? That's such a depressing story to live by, right? Yeah. Surely we should be telling better stories about ourselves, about whom we are and what we need to be going forward, based on scientifically viable facts. Surely there is an identity, an ecological niche that we can assume as a species so that we belong on the planet exactly as we are. Sustainability is attained when we can routinely contribute more to ecosystems than we consume from them, just as the elephants do for the forests of the Western Ghats and indigenous communities do for Amazon rainforests. Surely we can devise systems of social organization that can help us achieve that in our technological civilization. What common story should we live by that can what common story can we live by that can help us reach that goal? Such a common story was staring me in the face at Sai Sanctuary, though it took me 5 long years to piece it together. Pam and Anil were shining examples of how we can live in harmony with nature. Compassion for all creation was the core organizing value in their simple lives, not mindless consumption. In contrast, the poachers who had to be kept out of the Sai Sanctuary were desperately eking out a living by meeting the demand for ivory from remote consumers who had bought into the consumption paradigm. An older story from the book, the Courage Milk story, all over again. If we're so inclined, we can read the rest of the book, assuming that we are each part of a perfect whole, and therefore there's an infinitely compassionate higher intelligence at work in the cosmos at large. Call this higher intelligence God, Yahweh, Allah, Brahman, the Creator, etc. Hi Michelle, or Indica Floor. It is the same holistic intelligence which guides the elephant, the tigers, the birds, and the insects to routinely create the sheer perfection of the Sai Sanctuary. So he talks about the story of separation or the story of division that's rooted in exceptionalism, that in the last 100 years, the average human lifespan has more than doubled. Average per capita income adjusted for inflation around the world has tripled. So I just finished reading this story from this book, Michelle. It's Carbon Yoga. And it's about this couple who bought a coffee plantation and basically just left it alone. The only thing they did was to keep out the poachers from hunting the animals there, and they let the animals from nearby protected forests wander around, and they would eat some jackfruits, and then they would dump their droppings, and eventually became this thriving, thick jungle with a thriving biodiversity that had even richer biodiversity than the surrounding national forests of India, which were protected and quote-unquote managed carefully, with rows of trees and stuff. But all this couple did was basically get out of the way and let nature take care of itself. And so he's talking about, this is a true story, and at first it seems like a depressing story in terms of our role in nature. It seems that we don't have a place in nature where the only thing we can do is either to be destructive. And for the story is that we do have a role, and the role is, yeah, exactly. In fact, a friend of mine, so Indigo Fluorescent, reminds me of the current story spot Amazon rainforest, that a lot of it was planted. Yeah, beautiful. The story of what happened in India is similar to what's now happening south of the border in the US-Mexico border. A side effect of the whole immigration, trying to stop people from immigrating. There are a friend of mine who studies anthropology told me this. There are huge patches of land in the border where there are no human beings, and the forest is reclaiming itself, and plants are growing back there, and there's a rich biodiversity coming back. So again, it's like, it seems our role is supposed to be to get out of the way, right? But maybe there's a deeper story. Maybe it doesn't have to be so depressing, right? It's hopeful in the sense for nature itself, that there is hope for the earth, that and this is why we don't need to save the earth. We need to save humanity, really, right? Because nature knows how to take care of itself, and long after we're gone, it will reclaim itself. So it's kind of a hubris or arrogance to talk about, quote unquote, save the earth. So there's a new story arising from this story, the story of being a constantly destructive, divisive force on earth, with the exception of the indigenous people. And there's a story of the caterpillar and the butterfly. When a caterpillar nears its transformation stage, it begins to eat ravenously, consuming everything in sight. That caterpillar body then becomes heavy, outgrowing its own skin many times until it is too bloated to move. To a branch. Let me see if it works. If I move over here. Attaching to a branch upside down where everything is turned on its head, it forms a chrysalis, and an enclosing shell that limits the caterpillar's freedom for the duration of the transformation. Within the chrysalis, a miracle occurs, so similar to humanity's overconsumption. That's what's happening to the caterpillar. However, once it forms the chrysalis, this miracle happens. Tiny cells that biologists call imaginal cells begin to appear. These cells are wholly different from caterpillar cells, carrying different information, vibrating to a different frequency, the frequency of the emerging butterfly. At first, the caterpillar's immune system perceives these new cells as enemies and attacks them. Much as new ideas in science, medicine, politics, and social behavior are visually denounced by the powers now considered mainstream. But the imaginal cells are not deterred. They continue to appear in even greater numbers, recognizing each other, bonding together, until the new cells are numerous enough to organize into clumps. When enough cells have formed to make structures along the new organizational lines, the caterpillar's immune system is overwhelmed. The caterpillar's body then becomes a nutritious soup for the growth of the butterfly. When the butterfly is ready to hatch, the chrysalis becomes transparent. The need for restriction has been outgrown, yet the struggle toward freedom has an organic timing. Ah, whoa, you're the second person mentioning the caterpillar today. Exactly. So the activists and the change makers of today, people fighting for Black Lives Matter, people fighting for women's rights, queer rights, trans rights, all of these are the new imaginal cells of their caterpillar turning into a butterfly. So imagine the caterpillar that has engorged itself to a bursting point. Entering the pupal stage, its wall is turned upside down. War is peace, death is wealth, slavery is freedom, misery is happiness, isolation is friendship, which is the upside down world that we live in. By the way, this upside down metaphor is also in another story that I read recently called The Freedom Artist. It's pretty powerful. Because the world is so upside down, the system is so upside down, as the imaginal cells of the butterfly, we need to have an upside down thinking to make it right side up. We need to do the opposite of what the system is doing. We need to embrace our upside downness. So the caterpillar struggles to maintain its growth phase as it encounters the physical limits of the planet. The dominant class throws up one last quote-unquote savior, one who promises to make it great again, to restore its glory days when the hierarchical Arthurian lines were clearly drawn. And we know who that is, right? Right now. Always the savior of them, the great white hope, the orange man. Anyways, God above man, man above woman, whites above color, straights above gays, winners above losers, rich above poor, people above animals, us above them. But this is the last hurrah of the caterpillar as it tries to cope with the systemic symptoms of its own engorged state. Climate change is systemic, biodiversity loss is systemic, desertification is systemic, toxic pollution is systemic, inequality is systemic, poverty is systemic, slavery is systemic, sexism is systemic, racism is systemic, casteism is systemic, homophobia is systemic, speciesism is systemic. By the way, people often interchange the word systemic with systematic. They're two entirely different words. They're not the same words. There's a reason why the word systemic is specifically used here, and why I also use the word systemic on purpose. And sometimes people don't seem to hear it right and change my own words into systematic. I'm like, no, that's not what I said. I said systemic. Just as an aside, an important note is one of my pet peeves. So systemic means system-wide. That's simple. Systematic means using a system to oppress or to do something, to do anything. That's what systematic means. And often all of these are both systemic and systematic, but it's important to emphasize the systemic part of it more, that is system-wide. So any socio-economic system that is organized around consumption as a core value and competition as a core principle is bound to exhibit these symptoms. But the metamorphosis is inexorable. Quote-unquote imaginal cells addressing each of these symptoms have sprung up throughout its body politic. These imaginal cells are the precursors of the butterfly. The caterpillar system has been in a continuous state of war against these cells. One by one, the battles for ideas have been lost by the caterpillar. Slavery is now politically incorrect. Sexism is now politically incorrect. Racism is now politically incorrect. And on, right? Homophobia, queerphobia, etc. Alright, so that's the new story, is that the butterfly stage is, so the caterpillar stage is the overconsumptive predator species, which is humanity's stage right now. But we are creating more and more of these imaginal cells that are becoming the caretakers of the environment, of the earth. And the next step in humanity's evolution is for us to become caretakers of nature, similar to what that couple did in India, where we just played the role of being a caretaker species, and that's the butterfly stage. That's the new story that humanity needs to hear. So let me do. So if you have any questions, specific questions for the Akasha, for those watching, let me know. And I can ask a question for the collective, not specifically for you, but more like for the collective that might apply to you. For you, to do a reading for you, I would have to open up your Akashic records specifically, and I need your full legal name and date of birth. And so this is why I often do it, arrange that prior to the running the episode, and I even bring you on live to do that usually. And so if you want to take part in a future episode, normally it's every Monday. This is a special episode, and I often do it either at 10 a.m. PST or 6 p.m. PST. I've been alternating, and I believe the next spot available is the 24th. So contact me if you want to be on there. Michelle says, speaking of the butterfly stage, curious about time. We are evolving, but also know the challenges of climate change. So we have enough time? How do we hold evolution with that? Are we running out of time? So let me ask the Akasha or the Akashic records. And also in general what they have to say about it. About the story. So before answering your question, as a task for the collective, for the individuals of the collective, in order to transform from a caterpillar to a butterfly and to take on the role of the imaginal selves, contemplate this journaling question every day for at least the next 7 days, and really every day. What is my role as an imaginal self to take humanity forward into the butterfly stage of this transformation from a predator species, from this overconsumptive predator species to a co-creative caretaker species? What is my own role in this? What is the role of my own creativity? What can I create to bring this forward, to contemplate this question? In fact, if you want to go deeper into this, I am also launching a new program called Akashic Creativity to help answer this question. And I'll be talking more about this in the days to come. Now, as for your question, let me ask. Are we running out of time? So there is a fork in the road. So the Akasha normally doesn't answer questions about the future because there are multiple timelines simultaneously in the multiverse, and timelines are fluid, and there's free will, and it depends on, are we running out of time? It depends on the free will of each of the individuals, and also the collective as a whole. And the collective is made up of individuals, and it's also made out of systems. And so it's like a yes and no answer, right? In one timeline we are running out of time, in another we're not. And in terms of the actual facts, even from this book that I read from, Carbon Yoga, I think I read somewhere in this book that in a span of 40 years, we've already decimated half mammal species, I think. Yeah, I think like half the mammal species, I think, have gone extinct already. So at this rate, we might even just have 7 to 12 years in terms of the actual facts of what's happening, right? Do we have enough time to at least set the pendulum swinging back into the caterpillar and to the butterfly stage? That's the real question, right? Rephrasing the question. So let me ask, what can we do what can best be done to reverse some of this so that we choose the timeline that is not running out of time? Yeah. So the Akashic says that we really have to push for systemic change as well as subsystems change. In fact, I have another video and the Akasha wants me to talk about this, and I can send you a link to that. I believe the replay recording is still available on Facebook. It was a Facebook Live where I talked about the difference between ripple effect, social change, and subsystemic change, and the domino effects. In the ripple effect view, that is that if you become a better person, then your family becomes better. Then if your family becomes better, then the community becomes better, etc. So it ripples out. But the systems changes that are happening right now as the caterpillar engorges itself is so much that we're running out of time in terms of in that context. So it's better to take this contextually, right? We're running out of time to apply certain ideas, certain old outdated ideas that were really set up for our own comfort and complacency rather than real social change. And one of them is the ripple effect. We're running out of time to create change through the ripple effect. We're not running out of time if we apply subsystemic change, which is that a system is made out of subsystems. One of my statements that I've said last year is that the world is abundant, but the system is not, or the systems are not. So there is the system as a whole that includes all of the subsystems of racism, sexism, classism, ableism, and then there are subsystems within that as well that contribute towards it, that enable it, and we have to create new subsystems within the system that creates a cascade effect that would change the larger subsystems. It's just like a Russian doll or nested dolls, right? There is a doll, there's a nest, a subsystem, like concentric circles. So there's a subsystem, there's another subsystem holding the first one, then there's another subsystem, and another, right? Bigger and bigger. We need to start thinking about how to create the new subsystems. And if we do that, we won't run out of time. We will evolve. is about what strategies are most likely to beat uh, the facts, so that we reverse uh, the fact that factually we are running out of time, but in terms of timelines and things like that, we do have time if we apply this. So an example of a subsystem is even these apps like Instagram and Facebook. Even though they're still very racist platforms and they're very problematic, they do enable millions of people. In fact, there's 1 billion people on Facebook now, to communicate with each other when it used instantly, right? In video format, live, when a letter used to take months to reach somebody. Now there's instant messaging, and we couldn't see each other instantly like this. We had to travel by ship that took months to see each other and talk to each other like this. Now we talk to each other instantly. So that is an example of subsystem change. The reason why Black Lives Matter and things like that are so powerful is because people saw all the videos. Millions of people saw it instantly. That instant communication changed the subsystem. It's a subsystem of how we communicate, right? Even that is a subsystem. Once that was changed, it paved the way for the larger systemic change. Uber is another example of subsystems change, at least for me as somebody who doesn't drive or take the car. It's made transportation easier for me. So the subsystem of transportation, for example, even though Uber is also problematic, and I believe it's executive suite, C-suite is sexist, and it's causing problems in Africa and India and stuff like that. And this is why we, Black and Brown and Indigenous people, need to be the ones to be creating the new subsystems of the new communications, the new transportation subsystems. We need to really start thinking in terms of systems and subsystems, really start learning systems thinking, including ecosystems. Then we won't run out of time. That's what the Akasha wants me to say right now. And is there anything else? That's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching this. Have a great day, and if you want to hear from the beginning what you've missed, let me know. Again, I'm an Akashic Records reader as well as a multi-creative storyteller and changemaker, and I help you reclaim your joy, your pleasure, your freedom, your power, and your creativity. And I'm launching 2 new programs, Akashic Creativity and Akashic Power, in the next few weeks and months, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.